All right, in our previous episode of Failure to Fracture, we talked about the right hand architecture and sort of how to support the pick. And I got a lot of great questions in the comments about the architecture, and I'll try to cover some more of that in this video. But we didn't talk about where to actually put the pick, and that makes a big difference in your playing. So when you have the right hand architecture, in place as well as you can, where you actually position the pick on the string makes a big difference. Now, I'm sure any of you at this level of playing guitar have realized there's a big difference between strumming over here, like up on the neck or near the neck, the fretboard, and then strumming near the bridge. Obviously, the sound is completely different, but the actual reaction of the strings to the pick is also entirely different. So I don't know if you've ever tried playing anything sort of fast with the pick close to the fretboard, but it's a lot harder because the amplitude of the string is wider than it is near the bridge or near the nut. I think it's widest directly in half between the bridge and wherever the fret is that you're depressing. Either way, it doesn't matter so much about the mathematics. What does matter is where you are consistently picking the string, especially if you're playing something fast. And it's more than just tone. It's actually the physical reaction of the pick as it strikes the string and moves through it and then has to return back to its original position. So Robert calls this release and return. You release your wrist to make the pick go through the string, and then you return it back to its original position. And most of us call that a downstroke and an upstroke. Robert has a different sensibility about it, and I sort of understand it, but I can't claim that I do. He's written about it on his blog, so if you wanted to look that up, you can just look up Robert Fripp diary, release and return. So anyway, what I want to point out in this episode of Failure to Fracture is if you are trying to play Fracture and your pick is in the wrong place, maybe not the wrong place, but a place that doesn't optimize the pick stroke with the amplitude of the string, it's going to be a lot harder. And so what I do, and I'd encourage you to try this on your own, is to play like a chromatic riff going up and down the strings with the pick in a different position. So this is an example. So it's hard to do it consistently for all of the strings to do something like that. And obviously you go up and down and skip strings and just try to familiarize yourself with where the pick is and how the strings act. Now, your scale length of your guitar is going to affect all of this. And even like where you're fretting is going to be affected as well. Like when you fret further up the neck, it changes the length of the string that actually resonates when you pick. And so your tone can change as well. Now, your tone doesn't change a whole lot when you're right near the bridge. They call that sol ponticello, I think. So the string is really rigid as when you get really close to the bridge. And it's very effortful to get through the string with a pick when you're near the bridge. But in a different respect, it's very effortful to move the pick through the string when you're near the fretboard. Now you get different tonal options, but if you're trying to play Fracture and you're changing strings 10 times a second, you've got to really find that sweet spot. Now, Robert says like he places the pick in a he talked about something about like a guitar, like a Les Paul, that adapts or it facilitates where he uses the pick, or as part of his technique or something like that. And I found just watching him, he's typically somewhere like near the start of the bridge pickup and maybe an inch or maybe 2 inches beyond the edge of the bridge pickup on a Les Paul guitar. Now he's played 3 pickup Les Pauls, and he plays Fernandez Les Paul copies, and he played the Roland MIDI guitar a lot in the 80s. So he's had a variety of guitars. But as far as I've seen, like the way I think about it, and maybe this is what he does and maybe it isn't, but I think of it as kind of like the tailpiece of the Les Paul is kind of where this part, the back of my hand, starts. So I can kind of rub on the tailpiece there and get a sense of where the pick is based on sort of the length of my hand. But the way this works, and let's see, maybe I'll go up close. So the way this works is my pick is about here. Okay, it's hard to depict this. Perhaps I should have set up a second camera, but basically, if I'm picking up near the fretboard, I have to accommodate and move my entire forearm and elbow to a different location. Now, if I want that tone, you know, that kind of warm, jazzy kind of, you know, that kind of tone, yeah, it's really nice and it's great to get that, but you're kind of like playing with the physics of the string by plucking it or striking through it where it has a lot of amplitude. I do this when I play bass too. I'll often like pluck a string with my finger sort of in the middle of the fretboard. The tone's very different. And on an electric guitar, especially with new strings, they get a little snappy. So you can pick up some of that, you know, snappy, big, tubey tone. I don't know how to describe it. Also, it depends on which pickup you're using. So that's kind of like not totally relevant, but if you're after a certain tone, you can move the pick. But if you're after a certain song, like Fracture, or a certain technique, like what's used during the Moto Perpetuo, I'd stick to the sweet spot where Robert typically picks, which is in front of the bridge pickup. So somewhere in this area here. Now your hand may be smaller or bigger than mine. I think maybe I have slightly bigger hands than Robert. I have big hands just to begin with. But I've found, you know, hand size, a lot of people say, oh, my hand's not that big. You know, I've seen a lot of incredible guitarists with smaller hands who can do amazing stuff on the left hand and on the right. But again, I'm digressing. So when we're playing Fracture, when we talk about failing to play it, one failure possibility is the pick is not in the right place. All of the technique can be in place, but if the pick isn't there in the right place, it will cause you trouble. It'll be a stumbling block. So, let's see. So I typically am playing about an inch, half an inch in front of the pickup surround on this Les Paul. But if I try doing that like further up, I have to accommodate the pick and move my hand more because the string, like if this is the string and the pick strikes through it, it could be like waving around this much, and I've got to make sure the pick is in the right place to strike through it. So my pick strokes have to be bigger when I'm near the fretboard. So running through just playing things, anything on the guitar with the pick in a different place can teach you a lot, for sure. What it's taught me is there's like a strike zone. And if the pick is just, if my technique is off, it affects where I'm putting the pick. Sometimes if I'm too tense, I'm bringing the pick too far back, and the string is too rigid, or I have too much pick meat kind of sticking out, and it's literally hitting the bridge pickup. So all of these little finely tuned parameters need to be figured out to be able to play something like Fracture, so you don't drop the pick, miss notes, spin the pick. One problem that I've often seen, and this does have to do with the right hand architecture, is that the pick will spin. And I often find the pick is kind of forward. Like if this is where it should be, it moves forward almost to be like straight up with my thumb. And then it's really hard to accommodate that and still continue to pick notes. So if the right hand architecture isn't in place, if the angle of my guitar and the wrist are out of whack and I'm not paying attention to that, all of these things, it's like you need a delicate balance, kind of like fertile soil, fertile ground to make Fracture happen. I prefer to play it standing up. Obviously, Robert prefers to play sitting down, and he's done that for decades. But when I performed Fracture in Spain, I did it standing up because honestly, that was more comfortable. And sitting down here, I'm stumbling through it. I don't know. There's something about, I have sort of classical guitar training, and I want my right leg up high, and I feel the strap kind of like sagging a little bit. It's like, it's such a Goldilocks problem, where it has to be just right. And I know that Robert has, he's put Fracture on the set list for just a few nights in the last few tours of King Crimson because he said something like he wasn't really feeling it. And when I am working on Fracture, there are days where I'm feeling it and there are days where I'm not. And you really are kind of on the tightrope because you've got to be like really in fine form. You've got the right hand stuff going on, the left hand stuff going on, and the pick needs to be in the right place. And it's like everything we're talking about is like sub-millimeter accuracy, like surgical level precision. And it could be very, very easy to screw it up. It just falls apart really quickly. So yeah, when we talk about where to put the pick, sometimes I find like my hand is maybe a 1/4 inch too close to the bridge because I'm maybe depending too much on the tailpiece or on the bridge itself. Old habits die hard, and I used to basically depend on the bridge for my picking and changing strings with the wrist. So you really don't want to get into this trap of like counting on a place or a physical thing, But it is good to have points of reference. And you have to use your ears, you have to use your body. Otherwise, like, when I feel just sort of out of sync, I don't play Fracture, or if I try, it doesn't go well. Last night I was kind of on fire, and I almost recorded this video, but I waited until today, and I went on a 4-mile run, and it took a lot out of me this afternoon. And now I'm coming back to it going, oh man, I'm not sure I'm feeling it. But I do want to get this point across of the way you hold the pick and where you hold the pick. Because those things, they count. And when we're talking about strings that physically vibrate, you want sort of like, you want to optimize for guitar, for tone, the sound of what you're playing, and the feeling of the pick going through the string. For long-time guitarists, it's like sometimes when you trim your nails, you can feel like, oh, I shouldn't have trimmed my nails. That it took weight off of my finger. Like these little tiny things that are probably seemingly insignificant, they do add up. And so where we hold the pick makes a difference when playing Fracture. This is not something I covered in the book because, frankly, I didn't even understand it when I wrote the book. But I just had just a viewer on Make Word Music ask for a lesson, and he sent me some videos of himself playing, and there were a few things. His hand was like his fingers were curled in, his wrist was hyperextended, it wasn't like natural and loose, and the really minute detail that I could hear, just because I've done this for so long, is I could hear the pick was landing on the string and then going through it. So I could hear little infinitesimally small mutes for each pick stroke. So when you're picking, you want to make sure that you're going through the string and not pausing or allowing the pick to land on a string and then strike through it. So if a string is ringing, you can mute it with the pick and then strike through. These are little tiny details that you start to pick up, and that's an exaggerated version of what I was just talking about, but like when you're doing, you start hearing these really infinitesimally small detailed things when you use your ears and you sort of let go of what you're doing. So I have had to really detach and pay close attention to what is happening so that I can get to where I want to go. And yes, the technique is important, but the most important thing is, for me, the feeling of readiness and being present. And when all of these things are in, when the dials are just about right, the pick is in just about the right place, and my pick stroke is just narrow enough to go through the string, and I'm just feeling good on the strings and all of this stuff, it starts happening, And I think warming up is a big part of that. But also, like, if I have too much tension in my hand, I'll pull the pick back, and then suddenly I'm picking over the bridge pickup, and no bueno. So I think that's everything I need to cover. Oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention in the right-hand architecture video that I missed is that when all of the fingers are aligned and you have this sort of column of support right under the guitar pick, then the pick has a strong pillar of, like a foundational pillar, and it's not going to rock back and forth. It's not going to do this kind of thing, like move around a lot. But when you remove your fingers, or even like separate them, kind of like this, the pick can move around a lot. Like it can angle up and down. And so that's an important part of the right hand architecture, that the pick is not, the pick that's sticking out to hit the string is not moving around. So it's not pivoting, it's not bending, it's just barely moving through a string and striking like that. And you know, if the thing is moving a lot, like lots of amplitude, like you're over by the fretboard, it's gonna change the timing of your pick stroke. It's gonna change the force you need to apply for the pick stroke, and it'll be less predictable. So yeah, that's kind of what I had to say about strings and pick placement. I encourage you to just go through these kind of exercises of like play a riff like that all over, you know, just move the pick around and familiarize yourself with the way that feels, because there's a different intention, a different sound, there's a different everything about that. And I'll just remind you of the quote Robert said, the way you hold the guitar pick is the way that you live your life. And some days when my mind is a mess, monkey mind, fracture's not there because all the dials are out of whack, you know, like I'm not going to put the pick in the right place, or my wrist will be moving too much, or my thumb will bend, or I have too much tension in my body, or whatever it is. So these are all things to pay attention to, and pick placement is just another one of those things that I never really thought about or understood until I did, and it took many, many years to get there. So, hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments. Feel free to ask questions, and I'll see you perhaps in the next one. I don't know if there will be a next one. I'm not sure what else there is to say, but I bet there's, I have a little idea kind of tickling in the back of my head. Maybe it'll come up for another video. All right. Thanks a lot for watching.